Our next guest is Stu Wright. He's a partner at Giant London, specialising in leadership, coaching, and consultancy of senior executives and teams. He spent his career as an engineer, then spent 21 years in church leadership, including leading a resource church in an urban deprived area of London. He specialises in building multicultural teams and unlocking the potential and purpose of people's lives. Stu, it's great to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be with you, Bailey, and everybody else. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. So I'm just going to hand it over to you, Stu, and you can just take it away.
Oh, thanks, Bailey. Well, it's great to be with you all here at Stronger, and great to be back for another year. I'm going to speak to you a little bit about leadership that lasts, and then there's going to be some time at the end for questions. As I was sharing with someone that was speaking on this today, they said, hey, you should have gone for stronger for longer. And that's kind of what we're doing. We're going to be we're going to be looking this afternoon at how you can be stronger in your leadership for longer, or leadership that lasts. And how do we do sustainable leadership for the long haul? And I think it's going to be building on a lot of the really good things that Andy Bracknell just said in the talk before. So what we're going to do is I'm going to try and share with you 4 practicalities that every leader should know in order to have a sustainable long haul leadership. So I'm going to cover today, how do you play to your strengths? Because I think that's absolutely important if you're going to be in leadership, doing what you love for a long time. So how do you grow in self-awareness and know your personality? Because that's really important if you're going to be in long-term leadership and successful. Number 2, we're going to look at how to regulate your pace, because if you're in it for the long haul, you can't run fast continually. There's got to be pacing of it. And I'm going to share with you some lessons from trees, which sounds a little bit crazy, but we're going to do that. And then we're going to have a little look at how to develop an effective work-rest rhythm. And that's so important, isn't it? As we're still in this pandemic, and how do we switch off correctly? How do we get the rhythm right in order to be sustainable in leadership? And we're going to look at some seasons, how that works. And if we've got time, we'll look at how to have an effective recharge strategy. And there's a tool that we use at Giant called the 5 gears. Okay, so we're going to dive in with the first one, which is leaders that last play to their strengths. Okay, leaders that last play to their strengths. So what we're going to do here is we're going to have a think about, I want you to think about, are you drained by your work or energized by it? What energizes you and what drains you in what you do? And this is called the 70-30 principle. It's one of our key tools at Giant. And it says that it's a sociological principle that if you're spending 70% of your time doing that which is in your natural strengths, that which is your unconscious competence, in other words, you don't focus on being good at it, you just are good at it. It's what you're naturally good at, and it's energizing for you. If you're spending 70% of your time there, that's great. And then 30% of your time can be spent on what we call learned behavior, conscious competence. You can do it really well, but it requires quite a lot of energy from you, and therefore it's quite draining. And when I'm meeting with different leaders around the world, whether they're in church or business or different sectors, I ask them, where would you say you are on your 70-30? Would you say it's 70-30? Would you say sometimes it's 30-70? I'm coaching someone at the moment who says it's completely reversed for me, and they're completely drained and exhausted, and something's got to change. But sometimes people say to me, well, why is it not 100-0? Because surely it'd be better to have 100-0. But no, we know that we are growing in some of those tough times. And that's where the Lord often works on us, and we grow and we persevere, we grow resilience. So there needs to be some of that, but 70-30 is about right. So have a think even now as you're listening, what is your percentage? Where would you say you are at right now? Because what I want you to think about is, are you playing to your superpowers? And do you know what those are? Because leaders that know what they're really good at and spend more of their time doing what energizes them, I think Andy touched on this in the talk before, are those that are going to really enjoy their work and be able to do this effortlessly and for the long term. Not always effortlessly, but they're going to enjoy it so much more, and it'll be more sustainable. So one of the tools we have at Giant, and I'm sure there are other tools out there, but I just share this one with you as a system. It's called the 5 Voices, and it's a way in which we say, we get to know ourselves, we get to know our personality. Here are the different personalities. Everybody in the world fits into one of these personalities. So nurturers, which make up 43% of the population, are those who are champions of people, relational harmony, and values, and they live in the present. You may say, oh my goodness, that could be me. Creatives are those who are champion of future ideas, innovation, organizational integrity. Quite rare, only about 9% of the population, and that might be you, and you very much live in the future in those future ideas. Then you've got guardians. Guardians make up 30% of the population, and they're champions of due diligence, resources, and efficient systems and processes. So they're very present orientated, and they like to make sure things are safe and running really well. Then you've got connectors, 11% of the population. Connectors, everyone loves a connector. Connectors are champions of relational networks, collaboration, effective communication, and they live in the future, and they love to inspirationally tell you the great things they're learning. And then you've got pioneers. Fortunately, they only make up 7% of the population. I'm a pioneer, and they're champions of strategy, vision, they're results focused. They love to solve problems. Now, when you know what you are, you can play to your strengths. So I'm a pioneer, but if I was in a role where I was having to spend most of my day doing due diligence, compliance, making sure that the resources were right, and I was putting together systems and processes in the present, that would drain me. That would exhaust me. I couldn't do that for long. And so I need to make sure that the role that I'm doing is going to be fitting with the way that God's wired me. And so if you're interested in this, if you want to take a short assessment, you can create a free account using my affiliate link here. And it takes about 20 minutes and you could discover your personality. And I think it's quite important because knowing how God's wired us is worth the work, and increasing our self-awareness means that we can lead others more effectively. And so I'm just going to share that with you now. So there's a little tool that we have at Giant called Know Yourself to Lead Yourself. And what it's really saying is, if you're going to lead others really well, then you need to learn to lead yourself well. And what's the way of leading yourself well? Well, it means knowing yourself. So the way this works is an infinity loop. It means you never stop learning as a leader. And I liked what Andy was saying about, it doesn't stop when you're 40, whatever age you are listening to this, whether you're Generation Z, a millennial, you're like me in your 40s, or you're approaching retirement or beyond. It's never too late to learn new skills and to discover those behavioral tendencies. So here we go. As a pioneer, I have a tendency to prioritize task over people, for example. That's a pattern of behavior. That's an action that I do because I really want to see the task achieved by a set deadline. But the consequences of that is that I could overly drive my team, and maybe people in my team are not sure whether I really care about them. And that means I might get compliance, but maybe not empowerment of my team. So, and that affects my reality. So when I know that about myself, I'm going to be right. Okay, I'm going to make the effort to truly care for my team and not to drive them too hard, because I know my tendency. And what's so special about this is that I think it touches on that biblical aspect of character, because there is a link between personality and character. The Bible talks a lot about character, and yet is also full of incredible different personalities in the Bible. And here's the thing: if you can do the effort and work to know your personality, you'll know what your behavioral tendencies are in leadership. And that means that affects your character. It affects how you are, how patient you are, how well you work with other people. All these kind of issues are related. Character and personality are related. So doing that work is great. And as Christians, of course, we can bring that to the Holy Spirit and say, Lord, these are my behavioral tendencies. It's like a mirror's been put up to me. I want to get these right. And that gives you an opportunity to be stronger in your leadership and for it to last longer. So here's some questions for you on this one. Are you playing to your strengths? And do you know what they are? Do you know which leadership tendency will eventually erode your leadership? Oof, big question, that one, guys. But is there a particular tendency that you think, actually, in the end, that's going to sink me? It's a bit like a big liner, big ship in the ocean. One small hole won't be noticed initially, but after some time, more and more water is going to come in, and eventually it will sink that ship. So knowing your leadership tendencies, knowing what your strengths are, playing to them is essential for long-lasting leadership, to be stronger for longer. So that's number one. Let's look at the second aspect of leadership that lasts. So leaders that last regulate their pace of leadership, knowing how to regulate your pace. And I've really enjoyed recently reading this book, and I just wanted to recommend it to you. It's just so interesting. It's called The Hidden Life of Trees, and it's all about how trees communicate with each other. It's a reasonably new book that talks about the amazing technology now that they understand, that the sort of scientific knowledge of how trees communicate and work together. And in this amazing book, there was something that really stood out to me, and I want to share it with you. And it's this, that trees that live a long time are trees that have grown slowly, not fast. So you can see here, if you cut a tree in half, you will see the rings of growth. And if a tree's grown very quickly, there'll be big gaps between the rings, like this right-hand side of the picture. But if it's grown slowly, the gaps between the rings will be very small because it's very dense. And what happens is a tree is always being attacked by, whether it's fungi or little creatures, they're attacking all the time. And if you've got wide rings that have got a lot of air in there, it's much easier to get attacked. And therefore, fast-growing trees don't live as long. Whereas you go to some of these slow-growing trees and they live for so long. So I'm going on a little tour with my son to America in July, and we're going to go to Redwood National Park in California. And that's where some of these incredible trees are, redwood trees, that are, some of them have been there for more than 2,000 years. So they were there when Jesus was walking the planet. And how could they do that? They've grown slowly. Some of them are now over 300 feet high. They're incredible, but they've grown slowly and they've not rushed it. Now, why am I talking about this? Well, pace is really important, because if you're a leader and you're in a rush to see results, you may get those results, but at what cost? And how vulnerable will that make you? So I just want to be honest, as a church leader for many years, many times I look back and I think, gosh, I was in such a rush to get results. And that was costly sometimes for my family and for my team. And I think because we tried to grow so quickly, it made us very vulnerable. So, for example, and my wife is honest about this and doesn't mind me sharing, but in the last post I was in, she got depression. Why? I was working so hard. It was a tough place, as much as we loved the place so much. And she was depressed. My children were struggling in schools. And I didn't have the time to give to them because I was so focused on developing and growing. It was a real mistake. Equally, I'm coaching a leader at the moment who is the leader and a founder of an incredible organization that works with Christian charities all over the world. And it's growing incredibly fast. And he's just had an opportunity for it to grow at 3 times the pace. But he just said to me on a call the other day, Stu, I know the organization's doing great, but I don't have the capacity because I've run too fast for too long. Too fast for too long. And that's hard, isn't it? So knowing how to run at the right pace, to pace yourself so that you don't burn out, so that you can do things sustainably. And one of the tools we have here at Giant is called the 5 circles of influence. And I just want you to think about this in relation to pace right now. I want you to think, how can I be more intentional about how I use my time? And how are you in these areas related to pace? Are you looking after yourself? Do you have time for your family? Are you truly caring for your team, or are you running too fast? Are you giving time to truly understand those in your organization? And do you have time to give to your community? Because if we're accidental here, because we're just pacing it out, we're going to miss things and it won't be healthy. To finish that off, I love the words of Jesus, and there's 2 great books I recommend here on the right. where Jesus says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." And it's so easy, isn't it, to run ahead of Jesus with the excitement of the work we're doing, the people that we're leading. But I want to encourage you to pray harder and work a little bit less. And that's what Mark Batterson suggests in his great book, The Circle Maker, where he talks about achieving great goals, where you can dream big, pray hard, think long. And I love that phrase, dream big, pray hard, think long. But I want to encourage you to think about, instead of working a lot and praying a little, flip it and say, how can I pray more and work smarter so that I don't overpace myself and exhaust myself? So here's the question for you on this one. Is your pace of leadership sustainable? And maybe even ask the person closest to you in a relationship with you if they think it is. You may think it is, but they may say, no, you're going too fast. And how might you change your pace in order to have a leadership that lasts? Okay, that one's a deep one. And the third one we're going to look at is also quite deep, because leaders that last have an effective work-rest rhythm. And I briefly want to talk to you about rhythm. I read a great book over the summer, which I recommend. It's here by Mark Buchanan, called Spiritual Rhythm. And I love the subtext. It's called Being with Jesus Every Season of Your Soul. I'm like, I love that. That's so cool. And what he says is so important. He talks about the importance of seasons, but this is what stood out to me. He said, as a busy pastor with a very big church, he says, busyness does not equal success. And we might think as a leader, I've got loads going on, but that doesn't mean that you're truly successful, and especially not in God's eyes. What does success look like in God's eyes? Well, it's usually called fruitfulness in the scriptures. And we know that fruitfulness comes from abiding in Jesus. Now, fruit and fruitfulness needs seasons. And so therefore, we can't be in the same season all the time and expect to produce fruit. To produce fruit, you need to go through the seasons. And that means times of busyness, times of rest, times of activity, times of lack of activity. That's important. So finding a sustainable rhythm is really important. And what I've done here is I've kind of codified what Mark Buchanan's put together. And the question I've got for you is to think about the leadership you're in at the moment and think, what season am I in? And maybe the organization that you lead in, what season is your organization in? And the two might be different. Okay, so I want you to perhaps use this slide to think about yourself as well as your organization, or just choose one for now if it helps. Let me just explain it to you. So you may find that you're in a season of spring right now. And if you're in spring, that's great. It's a time of sowing, it's a time of planting or cleaning, and the busyness is high. That's great. The feeling is one of joy and hope, renewal. And the key question to ask if you're in spring right now in your life is, am I sowing the right things? Because eventually that's going to produce a harvest. So are you sowing the right things? Are you using this busy period of energy to do that which is right? And that, of course, needs prayer. Then there's summer. Summer's not like spring. Summer's an activity is a time for enjoyment, basking in the sun, if we get it in England, watching for growth, and the busyness is low. It's supposed to be low. The feeling is one of satisfaction. Things are flowing naturally when we're in summer. It's a kind of a little foretaste of heaven. And the question to ask is, am I resting in it? Am I enjoying this? And then we come into autumn. And it might be that you're in autumn in your life right now. And autumn, it doesn't just mean in terms of your age, like, oh, I'm late in life, they're in autumn. You can be in these different seasons at different ages in your life. And so autumn here would be a season of reaping, storing, perhaps preparing for winter. No, there's a tough time coming. Busyness is high because you're getting everything ready. And the feeling is one of expectancy and fulfillment. We feel most fulfilled when we've just received that harvest, and thankfulness. And in that season, the key question we should be asking is, what do I need to give away or invest in others at this time? That's what we should be thinking about in that season. And then, of course, there's winter. And not many of us like winter, because winter is a season where we're stopping, where there's pruning, where busyness is low, and we should be slowing down and quietening down. And the feeling here is one often of disorientation. What's going on? It can be sadness. It might be a bereavement or something tough has happened in your life that's brought you into winter. But it's also a season where there's often the greatest intimacy with God. And a key question when you're in winter is, what do I need to cut out? Because pruning happens in that season. We have to cut back in order to be more fruitful. And a huge mistake that I made in a leadership role when I was in church leadership was that I kind of always thought I was in spring. I was always sowing and planting, running the next course, planting the next congregation, or aiming for that. And there was, and it felt like we were going so fast, and we were always in that season, but we never really, I think, had a chance to truly celebrate the season we were in. It would have been good to have been more thankful, to give away more, and actually to cut out some things. So I just want us to think about that for a moment. What would it look like to allow yourself to be pruned if you are in winter? Because Jesus says, doesn't he, in John 15, every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it will be more fruitful. So God does prune us, which is painful. And the little picture here is of a pendulum where we're told to go from work to rest. I borrowed this taking this from the Order of Mission, the guys in Sheffield that have this great tool, the semicircle of how we order our work and our rest, so that we're not always in growth. We are sometimes in pruning, and in pruning we rest. And as I've reflected on pruning, which is an essential part of long-term leadership, of leadership that lasts, we need to think, how do we go through the pruning process well and not rush that? And I think there are 3 stages of pruning. I think there's the joyful stage where you can let go of things. You can say, oh, I'm so glad I don't have to do that anymore. I remember when I stopped being a church leader, I was thinking to myself, oh, it's quite good I don't have to do all the planning for PCC meetings anymore. I loved my PCC, but it was quite handy to not have to do that. There were some things that are joyful to let go of. But then there's another stage where it becomes quite difficult, because sometimes when you're cut back, you're letting go of team, you're letting go of a project that you've invested a lot in, you're letting go of responsibility, and it can be very disorientating. So pruning can be very difficult. And then there's a final stage, I think, of pruning, which I call death. It's literally death. It's the loss of role. It can be a complete loss of identity. It can feel devastated, and it can feel very much like a bereavement. And we almost have to go through that in order for the resurrection of spring to happen. And that's what happens in the seasons, of course. But from death to resurrection, we have a God who brings life out of death. So the questions for you here are, which season are you in right now? Which season is your organization in? And are you willing to be pruned? And I just want to encourage you to think about that. What season are you in? And your organization, and are you willing to be pruned? I think I'm going to stop there. There's another tool I was going to share with you, but I think that's what I want to share with you today, and then allow time for questions and some comments if people have them. So leadership that lasts plays to their strengths, understands pace and regulates that pace really well, and works hard to have an effective work-rest rhythm. And leaders that do that, I believe, will last, and you'll be stronger for longer. Thank you so much for listening today. This is how you can reach me if you wanted to email me, or you wanted to go on LinkedIn and connect with me there. And if you wanted to experience any of the Giant tools or the Giant platform, and perhaps even do the 5 Voices assessment to understand your strengths better, then feel free to use that little link there. That will take you through. Okay, thanks so much.
Stu, thank you so much. I have already been onto your website and I'm getting ready to sign up, because I was thinking, wow, what's my superpower? Although I think I've identified 2, but I just need to make sure that they are the right ones. But it's great tools that you do have on your website, Stu. And thank you very much for that amazing teaching. The question that I have for you, Stu, is Like, I'm one of those leaders who does focus a lot on my strengths. So I know what my strengths are and I play to my strengths. I also have people on my team who cover my weaknesses. In the areas that I know I'm weak and in the areas that they identify that I'm weak in. But what would you say to someone like myself who's maybe wanting to develop themselves more on those areas of weaknesses? What encouragement would you give? What advice would you have?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I would say definitely, first of all, know them. So have a self-awareness of them, and then intentionally think about how you could develop those. So what I would do is if you're in a team environment and you know that someone else is really good at something that you're not so strong in, that's a really good opportunity to spend time together and say, okay, how come you're so good at this? What do you do? What advice would you have for me? So for example, if you take the 5 voices, I'm a pioneer and I will have nurturers in my team. And it could mean that we would have a lot of conflict because I'll want to do things that the other person might not want to do, or they'll get frustrated that I do that and not that. But if I spend time listening to that person in my team so that I'm understanding where they're coming from, I'm understanding their strengths, then it can help me in my challenging areas, because then I'm like, okay, that's how they do that. So I would say definitely being in a team environment and listening and valuing everybody is essential. And maybe asking someone to hold you to account on some of those other areas that you're a little bit challenged on. But I would say this, we don't have to be superstars in every area. There are going to be parts of our leadership that we're just not as good at. And I think the key thing is that we know that, and that we still play to our strengths, but we build around our challenges with some great people.
That's great. Thank you so much. I'm still waiting on questions and I feel like I'm in a therapy session with you. So please, guys, if you do have any questions, then post your questions. But I'm going to use this opportunity to pick Stu's brain. So Stu, I get called the Chief Visionary Officer in my organization. And I do tend to go 100 miles an hour and I try and stop myself. So going back to what you mentioned about pace, I guess, how do I continue to carry everyone, but also slow myself down and thinking about the pace and what Jesus says to us in Matthew 11? Because when you read it in the Message translation, and I'll just read it for you guys.
Yeah.
It actually says, "Are you tired, worn out, burnt out on religion? Come to me, get away with me. You'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." But obviously when I'm running that race, I feel free and light because I am running towards a vision. So what advice do you have?
Yeah, I think it's great, Bailey. And it's so exciting that you're passionate about vision and you're running for it. And I'm sure that just like fills other people with passion and excitement. And that's brilliant. I think that the thing to do with that passion and that vision is to always be checking in checking in on others around you to kind of just get a sense of how are others doing with this? Because what you may find really exciting and feel like a steady pace, for someone else might feel like a million miles an hour and might feel quite scary. So I think that this little tool here, the 5 circles of influence, is a great little way of checking in and checking in yourself. So first of all, are you doing okay? Are you getting times of rest? Are you looking after yourself? Are you getting times with God? Are you finding that because you're so excited, it's taking up all your time, that you're not getting time for anything else and you're actually beginning to feel quite tired? So that's a good thing. Self-care. So a little check. How am I doing? How's my walk with God? How's my rest time? Am I doing stuff that's life-giving to me outside of work? Or is it all just in the vision? So that would be a really good little tester for yourself. And then the next one, like I talked about a little bit, is family. Like I made such a mistake here, Bailey, because I like you, I'm quite a visionary leader. I get passionate and excited about what we can do. And I bring the team with me. At least I think I'm bringing the team with me. They'll come to that in a minute. But in the excitement of it all, I might be skimping on some of the closest relationships to me. And, you can kind of go home or come out of your Zoom room, where you've been working and be with the family, but you still got all work going around in your head. And like, you're a member of your family. For me, it might be one of my children might be wanting to talk about something with me, but I'm not truly listening because I'm still kind of solving a work related problem that I'm excited about. And in the end, what happens is I end up skimping on relationships. So and they might say that to me. They might say, hey, Dad, you're not truly present with me. You're in another world. So I think a good test is my relationship with my family healthy right now? That's always a good test, because if that's good and you're still really passionate, then you're doing really well. And then I think checking in with the team and having regular times where you just ask the team, how are we doing? Are we going too fast? Being vulnerable. Say, look, I have a tendency to get overexcited and push us a bit hard. How are we doing, guys? I just want to put my hand up and say, I want to ask honestly, what might we not be doing right? And doing vulnerability well when you are a visionary leader is deeply endearing and helps people to stay with you. So checking in on your team and truly listening to that feedback. So that's really important. And then, how does this fit with the organization? Because sometimes we can be passionately heading after a vision, but actually it's slightly different to what the wider organization wants us to be doing. So we have to make sure that we're in alignment with that, and that we know how other people are doing in the organization, not just in our little team, in our little bubble. That's a really important question to ask. And then I think a good question to ask is, do I have time for my community? Am I giving something back outside of work? Am I caring for the poor? Am I doing something for somebody where there's no strategic benefit for me? Because often visionary leaders, everything becomes strategic because we're focusing, we're aligning all our resources, all our energy on achieving that incredible goal. And a good health check on what makes particularly pioneer vision leaders healthy is to just give some time to somebody that could never reward them, that could never pay them back. You might be working with the local homeless charity, or getting involved in something in your church, just giving something back. And you may think, oh, that's counterintuitive. That's not going to help me with my vision. Well, it really is, because actually you grow as a person. You start to restore certain tanks that you may not realize have diminished. So like capacity tanks, patience tanks, creativity tanks, because we don't realize sometimes that the harder we're working, we end up with diminished results. So we think we're getting more fruit, but actually the fruit gets less and less and less unless we're taking the time to have more of a holistic life outside of it. So this is a good test. 5 circles of influence, Bailey. I don't know if you want to come back on any of that.
Oh no, that's great. And what would you say with a visionary? Where should my focus be? To, like, with a pioneer, you're focusing on the community. So as a visionary leader, should I be focusing more on my family? What would you suggest?
Yeah, I think it's great that you, as a visionary leader, you'll have a vision for the thing that you're called to in your vocation, in your role, in your job, and that's great. And I think all I would say is that it's good to just have check-ins and make sure that you're not getting out of balance in your family, because in the end, that's really hard. I mean, that was certainly my story, Bailey, that I was running a church that it was the most exciting church, and I wouldn't want to run another church. I had the best team. We were planting congregations. It was so exciting, but I think I'd taken my eye off the effect that was having on my family because I was working so hard. And I think it's great to be passionate and excited about what we do, and God's given us that. but there is a real responsibility to be healthy, relationally, emotionally, taking care of those who are closest to us, those that God has given us responsibility for, family, friends, and so on. Because in the end, those things come back and, we're shirking our responsibility in another area if we're putting too much time into one. So it comes back to just trying to be intentional in the most important things in your life.
Great, thank you. And Stu, I don't know whether you can see the screen, but on my other screen, I can see Patricia saying great information and ideas. And she also loved your wonderful presentation. She's also said, yes, give when you probably can't receive back. This is so cool and really good for us. So that's some of the feedback that we're getting online from your presentation. I've already tweeted about superpower. I think that's going to be my tweet of the day and my quote of the day. But just to wrap up, I'm just curious to know, what season are you in? What season do you feel you're in right now?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think interesting. So I would say I've been in winter for quite a long time, where I just felt so pruned and it was so hard. But and I think I went through those stages, and it was at some point it felt like death. Like, who am I? What's my role? God, why am I no longer doing this? And now I'm doing this. But I would say now I've moved into a time of spring where I can see where we're going, and I'm investing in some incredible leaders around the world, which is such a privilege to work in. So I'm in a time of sowing, of busyness. It's joyful, it's hopeful, and I'm checking out, am I sowing in the right way? So I'm in spring right now, which is exciting. And I think that aligns with Giant, the organization I work with, which is a wonderful organization of coaches and consultants, who are also, most of whom are Christians. And we want to help leaders be their best, whether that's in church, whether that's in charity, whether it's in business, whatever sector. So I think I'm in spring, and I think Giant's in spring. But I want to just check that everybody else listening knows what season they're in, because it may not be spring. And whatever season you're in, just try and sit in that season and do what's appropriate in that season, because in the end, you'll be blessed by the Lord if you do that.
Amen. That's absolutely amazing, Stu. And it's great that you've also given us that diagram so we can look at it and just meditate on it again. I would just love to thank you. And from everybody, Matt's also saying, love this great session, Stu. So I just want to thank you on behalf of everybody for just sharing that wisdom and insight to us. And I'm sure we've all got a lot of homework to do. I know I've put lots of questions for myself. I'm asking myself, is my pace of leadership sustainable? And I'm definitely going to meditate on John 15 this week, because it seems to be coming up a lot, especially on the leadership sessions. And I don't know what the viewers at home, what your takeaways, Matt says he's starting a spring season now after a bit of winter. But something that I also wanted to ask you though, Stu, is, do you think lockdown and the pandemic has made us all feel like we're in winter?
Oh, that's a great question. I think for some people, and probably most people, yes. Although I do coach some business leaders that have found that the COVID season has given new opportunities for their business and flourishing. So I don't think it automatically means winter, but I think for many it does. For example, to be honest with you, when in my last role, when we were still we're just the start of the pandemic, one of my team members died of COVID. I mean, that was so horrific. And it felt like we all went into winter as we mourned, and we were like, what is going on? We were confused, we were disorientated. And we were working out what needs to change. And I think the church in general during COVID is saying, well, hang on a minute, what am I not going to do anymore as I come out of this? What are the new things we do need to do? We're in a new world, in many ways a digital world. What needs to change? So I think, yes, winter is true for a lot of people in COVID, but not for all people. Some people, I think it's been a time of spring, and possibly the other seasons too. So that's a good question to ask. How has COVID affected your season? Where do you think you are now?
Stu, I could talk to you all night. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your input, and just thank you for the wisdom that you have brought today. How can people continue to connect with you? Are you able to just share your contact?
Yeah, I'll just quickly put that up there. I mean, the going on the leadership platform is totally free, and you can do in 20 minutes, you could discover your leadership voice, which I think is just so helpful for self-awareness. If people want to email me, I'd love to hear from you and support you in any way I can. And I'm on LinkedIn. So yeah, be great to hear from anyone. It's been great to be with you guys today. I'm loving Stronger, and I'm looking forward to listening to some great talks in the next day.
Thank you so much, Stu. Have a good evening.
You too. Thanks, Bailey. Bye.